Stories from Real Life is a powerful podcast where everyday people share extraordinary true stories that inspire, move, and connect us. Melvin E. Edwards asks questions that you didn't even know you needed answered. Each episode gives you a lesson to learn, a reason to believe, and a second chance to be your best self. Listen to new episodes of Stories from Real Life every Tuesday and Friday. Pardon me while I go listen to this new episode right now.
On today's edition of Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. Our guest for this episode is Christopher Brewer. Christopher Brewer is a veteran with extensive international security experience. A former Ranger Battalion NCO and Special Forces officer, he has served in critical roles across Afghanistan, the United Arab Emirates, and Nigeria. His career spans military service, strategic consulting, and specialized training in high-stakes environments, including work with the U.S. State Department and Presidential Guard units.
And so in some cases, you might never know what had really happened, depending upon this particular situation. Sometimes it would hit the news. El Salvador was a good example, where guys would get attacked, some of them would be killed, and those were missions where, quote, U.S. combat troops are not there, we're not doing combat operations, and then the government has to explain why a couple of guys got killed.
Let's join today's episode with Christopher Brewer.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me for the podcast where personal stories can have a global impact. As you heard in the intro, my guest today is former Special Forces Officer Christopher Brewer. Hi, Chris, and thank you for being here today.
Hey, and thank you so much for having me.
Your new book is called In the Shadows Between the Wars, Becoming a Special Forces Operator. Unlike conventional military memoirs, your book focuses on the overlooked periods when Special Forces operated in over 130 countries without any public recognition. So you are a retired U.S. Special Forces officer with 38 years in combined military and security contracting experience. What makes the Special Forces so special?
Good question. And it's something that, quite frankly, scares a lot of the conventional commanders half to death. Special Forces, they get a job, they get a mission, they'll get some preparation, and then they're sent out. Now, today, we've got all kinds of communication devices. So even the guys have got cameras on their bodies as they're going through, hitting targets and doing what they may do. But the bottom line is, once they're out, they have to make a lot of decisions on their own. And quite often, almost always going to arise that hadn't been anticipated. So these are guys, and they're really diplomat soldiers who are out there far away. No one is going to be able to come to help. We saw that with a team that was in West Africa not too long ago, where several of them were killed. Even when things go bad, even when you know things are going bad, it's a matter of hours, if not days, before anyone can come to help to influence the situation. So these guys are out there very much on their own. They've got to make a lot of decisions, and no one's coming to help.
Wow. So what would have happened if any of the missions in those 130 countries that I mentioned had failed?
It depends on how they fail. And a lot of them did, in fact, fail. Back in the period where I served, in the 80s and the 90s, cell phones were just coming in. Most people did not have cell phones. It was landline telephones. Laptop computers were just beginning to come into vogue. Most people didn't have laptop computers. So when we would go out, the standard was we were required to set up the radio and call back to the headquarters in the United States once a month to let them know that we were still alive, and two, give them an update on what was going on and receive additional instructions. And then there was a long period in between those comm shots where you were literally on your own. And sometimes missions would fail and nobody would come up on comms. And so in some cases, you might never know what had really happened, depending upon this particular situation. Sometimes it would hit the news. El Salvador was a good example, where guys would get attacked, some of them would be killed, and those were missions where, quote, U.S. combat troops are not there, we're not doing combat operations, and then the government has to explain why a couple of guys got killed.
So do you think peace through strength is the best policy?
No question about it. It's Putin has said, the Russians have always said, when you advance with the bayonet, press forward, and if whatever you meet is soft, you keep pressing forward. If you find steel, pull back. The Arabs have a saying, no fear, no respect. And you'll find that in very many parts of the world. We have a tendency to go out and try to project our morals and our standards and our beliefs onto other cultures. And it just doesn't work. You have to understand their culture. You have to understand what's important to them. And you have to go ahead and work within their parameters, especially when you're out there by yourself. And that's one of the key things about special forces. You learn the language, you learn the culture, you learn how to live among them and respect how they believe, but still maintain your moral standards. And that's a real delicate balance.
Okay. When you hear the name Pablo Escobar, what goes through your mind?
Pablo Escobar. There's a chapter in the book. We had a mission in Colombia. Give you just a quick laydown on that. And we talked about you weren't there and it didn't happen. That was one of those examples. We'd come back from Costa Rica, where we were training police down there, and I saw Galan, the presidential candidate, assassinated on TV. And I said to myself, somebody's going to get a telephone call. And I swear, telephone rang, got a call to come in, and we had a mission to go down to Bogota. The Colombians needed a medical corpsman school because they had no medics in their military. And the soldiers were very hesitant to go out on patrol in the jungle because if you got wounded, a lot of them didn't survive because there was no medical treatment, not even first aid bandages.
Wow.
So they figured out that was important, and that was a non-combat support type thing. So they asked the U.S. government for help. But the place where they wanted to do the training was in Bogota, and there were bombings, as many as 100 bombs going off every night. Small bombs, not major attacks. But nonetheless, there were people getting killed every night. So they didn't want to send in your usual support troops. So it came over to Special Forces, and we were reassigned to the support unit that normally did these things, Security Assistance and Training Management Office, SATMO. And then we flew into Bogota in civilian clothes with civilian luggage, with uniforms in the luggage, no weapons, one radio. They gave us weapons when we got there, took us down to South Bogota, and dropped us off. And the last thing the RSO told us is, it's too dangerous. We can't come down here. You guys are on your own. Call me once a week and let me know you're still alive. And if you need anything from us, I'm afraid you're going to have to make your way back up to us. We can't send a vehicle down here routinely. It's just too dangerous. And during the course of that, Escobar called in, and I don't want to give too much away in the book, but there were things going on in the valley between Bogota and Medellin that very closely paralleled what was in Tom Clancy's Clear and Present Danger book. Only there weren't U.S. combat troops there. There were other people there. And they asked us to fly out and help. So 2 of us flew down there. We took a look at things. Escobar did, in fact, know about those American personnel there. He did intend to come kill them. And we set up some things and made some arrangements for his visit. And when he arrived, he decided, well, he didn't really want to visit that badly after all. And he went back home.
What was the outcome?
The outcome was no one got shot and nobody got killed, and he called the embassy and said, I don't give a damn about your radar or your Green Berets, go ahead. And then the embassy called back down to us in this little Colombian Air Force base in the jungle, in the valley, said, great job, we really appreciate what you guys accomplished, you can come home now. They flew us down on a Colombian general's aircraft. But the general is very busy and the aircraft is not available, but you guys are Green Berets. You can make your way back on your own, can't you? And then we had to figure out how to get back to Bogota from there.
Well, obviously you made it back. How did you make it back? I'm really curious how this story goes.
In a very old, beat-up station wagon with a chicken in the cage in the back that nobody would have thought to look at.
Okay. Wow. That's really interesting. And all these stories are in your new book.
They are. There's also another interesting thing that happened was just cause the invasion of Panama happened while we were down there. We narrowly missed being into Cuman Airport in Panama when the invasion happened. You'll read about that in the book. But we did get sent down there immediately after the Colombian mission ended. And there was a mission called Operation Promote Liberty. Not too many people have heard about. But Promote Liberty was after all the combat troops went back to the States. They gave the Panamanian National Guard their guns back. They told them, you're not military any longer, you're police, which they really hated. They didn't like that at all. They liked being military, and they thought the police were the guys who were too fat and lazy to be in the military. And they spread us out over the whole country. 2 here, 4 there. Said, you guys live with them, you're tripwires. If they decide to pull a coup and take the country back, then you let us know. And if you stop calling in and reporting, then we'll know you're dead. And we spent 6 months down there until there was, in fact, a coup attempt almost a year later. And we were in the middle of that.
Wow. So what happens if the United States completely withdraws from all world events outside of this country?
Well, no one really knows. All kinds of bad things happen. People who would be inclined to do bad things will go ahead. Ukraine is a excellent example. Putin moved in during the Obama administration to the Crimea, or in Russian they call it Krim, because he indicated that the United States didn't want to get involved in a kind of a fight with a nuclear-powered nation. They moved in during Biden, when Biden openly said, well, they're probably only going to take a little bit, and which to the Russians is a green light. Remember, when you're pushing the bayonet in, if you meet nothing but soft, you push. You meet steel, you pull back. When you demonstrate, when you make it crystal clear that if you cross this line, we will take action that will harm you, and they believe that, then people will back off. If it's an open door, they're going to go, and it's national policy as to which fights do we want to weigh in on. And that's important because obviously we can't be everywhere all the time. We can't be everything to everybody, but we can have a calming influence. When you remove that calming influence, then these fights are going to start, and then you just have to let them go to their conclusion.
Well, you mentioned we can't be everywhere all the time, but sometimes we get involved because we provide arms for one side or the other. So what is the greatest risk when America arms a country to fight its own battles? That it'll turn out in ways that you did not anticipate. Arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan when they were fighting the Soviets is an excellent example. That turned into Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And it's always difficult to decide what's going to be the right move, and you don't really know until later on how it's going to turn out. But sometimes you need to go and apply pressure now, and then you need to pull back and see what happens. Panama was a good example. Noriega was a problem. We had vested interest with the canal down there. Something needed to be done. A lot of it had come about because of things that we did. We supported Noriega, who got involved with drugs with the Colombians, and that spun out of control. We had to step in and take Noriega out to bring it back under control. But we didn't leave an occupying force. We left 2 companies of Special Forces Green Berets while they sorted things out on their own. And when the coup came about, we supported the legally elected government of Panama to help them survive that coup attempt. And then we left.
It's your country. You sort it out. You figure out what's going to go from here. And we kept all the people who had been involved, the power base and the army, we kept them in the barracks. So you guys still got a job. You got a future if you want it. The guys that were in charge of you that helped cause all these problems will help take them out. So it's entirely up to you. You can rebuild your own country. In Iraq, we stayed there and we tried to set up a democracy in the middle of a place where people have been warring and fighting one another for centuries. We did the same thing in Afghanistan. We've won the Afghanistan conflict within the first 3 weeks. It was over. The Taliban withdrew. Bin Laden was on the run. The Northern Alliance went into Kabul. Everybody was happy for almost a year after that. But then we decided that we're going to stay and we're going to build up this place to be an example of a democracy in the world. If you know anything about Afghanistan, there are more warring factions in there than you can literally count. It's worse than Iraq in that regard. And Karzai was going to sign a peace treaty with the Taliban. They were going to have a loya jirga to determine power sharing and how we're going to go from here. We could have pulled out at that point in time and left them to go ahead and sort things out with the understanding that you harbored people who hurt us badly. If you do that again, we will come back. And again, it's hard to predict how things would turn out. But in retrospect, that probably would have been the best course of action.
Did you work directly under a Secretary of State?
Only once after I had left, and not directly under the Secretary, although I did work in the State Department for a period of time as a regional strategic initiatives coordinator. And I believe, I can't remember who was the Secretary of State at that point in time. But we've had good ones, we've had bad ones. Did not like Hillary Clinton. Didn't like the outcome on those decisions at all. Libya was a horrible mistake. The Arab Spring was a mistake. When Egypt threw out Mubarak, and we encouraged that and encouraged them to hold elections. So that was a very naive move because the only political organization in Egypt that was organized to win an election was the Muslim Brotherhood, which was the source for where Al-Qaeda and al-Zawahiri came from. So they took over. One man, one vote, one time. That's it. We're now an Islamic Republic, which resulted in another revolution shortly thereafter because the Egyptian people didn't really want that. And having supported the overthrow of a military dictatorship that was oppressive to the people, we had a brief span of a Muslim Islamist dictatorship followed by another military dictatorship that's oppressive to the people. And the only thing we really accomplished was a complete loss of faith and confidence in the United States. So I would say during Hillary Clinton, that was just a disastrous period for all of us.
Do you think most secretaries of state appreciate the psychological challenges of operating undercover in hostile territories?
Most, I don't know. Some do. A lot do not. There's a paragraph in the book, or not a paragraph, there's a chapter in the book toward the end where sometimes special forces will operate in plain clothes, and this was one of those cases. And we were spinning when the Republic of Korea was concerned that there was going to be an invasion during the Clinton administration. And they wanted us to come in and look at the non-combatant evacuation order. That kind of tied in with some other things that we were doing. And the embassy had a plan that they had not discussed with the U.S. military that basically involved evacuating 15,000 people in 24 hours. And their attitude was, well, the military will do what we tell them to do. And we had to get into that and talk to the military, talk to them and show them this. Says, look, your premise is based on assumptions that are not facts. That's simply not going to work. That can't happen. And then we had to come up with some things to help guide them. One Secretary of State that I had a tremendous amount of respect for was Colin Powell. And Colin Powell, the Powell Doctrine, that basically if you're going to interfere if you're going to invade, if you're going to use military force, you do it only if it's, I forget what the term he used, if it was in the interest of the United States. Number one. Number two, when you do it, you use overwhelming force. You don't half step. You get in there, you get it done quickly. And number three, you don't go in unless you've got a plan on how you're going to get back out. And Colin Powell understood. And unfortunately, we rarely see that same principle applied.
So what are some of the psychological challenges of performing undercover in those hostile territories?
Now, just the fact that you're undercover. And in our case, they would get very uncomfortable when we would talk about cover. They would say, you're not undercover. All we want you to do is grow your hair out long, wear civilian clothes. Don't tell anyone you're in the military. For God's sake, don't tell anyone you're in special forces. And if asked, just say that you work for the embassy. You say, well, okay, but that's not undercover. No. That's I didn't say an unclassified legend. You're presenting a visual appearance that is not who you really are, and you're not denying anything, and you're not saying anything. You just basically try to keep your mouth shut, do what you're going to do, and get back out. But a lot of pressure on that. And again, it's even more. Remember, we talked about special forces. When you go out, nobody's coming to help you. Mm-hmm. Well, in that instance, where we're plain clothes, we were definitely out, but we were a taxi cab ride away from the American embassy. But no weapons, completely unarmed. You can't carry weapons because that would counter the impression you're trying to give. And then we still had to go into very bad places where very bad people were doing very bad things. But we had to go in, take a look around, and then come back out and report what we'd seen. If your plan didn't work, you just weren't coming back out. You'd never be seen again. And so there's a chapter in the book that talks about how that works and some of the things that you have to do. But it involves being very careful, thinking ahead before you do anything, have a plan, and then when you start to see certain little indicators pop up, and you usually will be able to tell if you're getting into trouble, knowing what to do, when to do it, and just get out before bad things can occur.
How did your military training prepare you for strategic work at the Department of State?
Not very well. I would say the training, the language and the cultural training helped, but the experience of being out there on the ground and working with people was more training for Department of State than anything else. And a couple of things that we learned is listen more than you talk, because people love to talk. And if you'll, just as you're doing here, if you ask questions and let the person ramble on, you'll learn a lot of interesting things. And two, you got to adjust what you're doing to what's important to the people there. And don't mislead anybody. Don't lie to anybody. But you kind of have to follow their lead. We'd be asked by the Afghans many times. He said, well, are you guys going to stay and help if we fight the Taliban? And unfortunately, we kind of led them to believe that, yes, we will always be here. But the correct answer for all of those situations is, no, I can't promise you that we're going to be here. If you decide to stand up and fight these people, we're here right now. This is what we've got right now. We can help you right now. But things change. I can't promise you when we're going to leave or how we're going to leave. That's in the future. You're going to have to make your own decisions on that.
All right. Speaking of Afghanistan, you were there as an instructor and a force protection advisor. Can you share a defining experience that illustrates the challenges of working in such a hostile region?
Oh, geez. The interesting thing about Afghanistan is there's no one defining thing about that whole country that explains everything there. It's in the north, you've got Tajik, Uzbek, and about 9 other different tribes that are not Tajik or Uzbek. But the prevailing language up there is Tajiki, Dari. Then you get down in the center, you got the Hazara. And the Hazara are basically the leftovers from the Golden Horde from Genghis Khan. Very Asian looking, and they're Shia, not Sunni Muslim. And everybody around them hates them. And then you get on the south side, you have the Pashtun. But there's dozens of different tribes of Pashtun. There's at least 5 or 6 different dialects of Pashto. And then you get a little bit farther south, you have the Baluch that are down in Pakistan. And that's Pakistan, but it's not really Pakistan because Baluch are not the same as the Pakistanis that are predominantly Pashto, except for the ones that were driven out of India that are predominantly from some of the Hindu tribes. And that's just one quick overmatch that only rarely breaks the surface. And they all have different beliefs, objectives, attitudes, languages, and it's just a hodgepodge. It's all mixed up and dropped in the middle of the Himalaya Kush Mountains. That's terrible terrain, almost impossible to navigate around. And we flew in there and with the attitude that we're the United States and we're here to make you into a functioning democracy. And heaven help us all when that came in. But we did a lot of good. I got in there just about a year after the invasion. Everything was shattered, landmines everywhere. It looked like something out of a Lord of the Rings novel of the shattered land. But we took mines out. We built roads. We built hospitals. We built schools. We brought back electricity. We did a tremendous amount of good for Afghanistan over the time period that we were there. But getting and knitting them together into a functioning nation probably would have taken another 20 or 30 years to accomplish. And in my mind, we could have done it had we kept Bagram Air Force Base and we maintained the air power there and maintained the special operations element that was there. Because the government had built up to the point where they weren't just bribing all the different warlords. They were telling them, says, look, you're going to have to cooperate. And the Afghan army was fighting. The commando units in particular that I helped work with and train, they had terrible casualties. They were fighting hard. But they couldn't do it without air power. If we had left that in there, there's a chance that they would have been able to at least strike a balance. But you've also got to remember that right across the border in Pakistan, all of those territories on the west side of Pakistan are Pashtun, and they don't consider themselves part of Pakistan. They don't consider that border to be a real border. So you've got several million people, strong fighters over there in that other country that we won't touch because that's an allied nation. And then you add all this together, how are you ever going to fix that? Now, you never will get it to where you want it to be. The only thing you can do is get it to where it's calmer than it was when you came.
All right. Your career includes training presidential guards in the United Arab Emirates and consulting in Nigeria. So what did you learn from being exposed to those different kinds of international context?
Boy, those are 2 good examples. I mean, there's some... the UAE is a fascinating place. It's a beautiful country. The King Zayed, back in, I guess it was in the 60s, but the 50s and 60s is when Saudi Arabia started to form. When the Saudi king started to try and unite all the tribes, and he was forming the country. Well, King Zayed, that was up in the north where the UAE was located, there were 7 small emirates up there, with Abu Dhabi being the largest one that King Zayed was the king of. And they decided that, well, we really don't want to be part of Saudi Arabia, but they are going to consume us if we can't make a stand against them. And he organized the 7 northern emirates and didn't fight, but he communicated with the Saudi king that, look, we're all brothers here. We don't need to fight one another. We want to be our own country. But of course, we recognize your power. We recognize your eminence. We will never make any trouble. And he was able to strike that balance. So the Emirates became a separate country. But while the Saudis were very religious, very strict, very specific on how they wanted everything in their country to run, Zayed and the Northern Emirates, they decided, well, we open the door, we can make a lot of money. And if we make money, that helps us counterbalance being assimilated from the South. So they have their own rules, but they invited in foreign investment, all of the rest of this. And that's how Dubai sprang up. Dubai has most of the money, but Abu Dhabi has most of the military power and most of the oil. And not too many people know this, but there's probably only about 18% of the whole population in the UAE that are actual people, actual citizens of UAE. The majority of the population there are all foreigners who come in there to do contract work, do various things, construction. And that's a great example of how to maintain that balancing act between diverse cultures and people. And they do an amazing job of it, and while still maintaining their national and religious identity. So my hat's off to them in that regard. I really enjoyed working there. Fascinating place. Nigeria, similar in many respects, but very, very different. You have the Yoruba tribe that's down along the coast, and that's where the British did a lot of their colonization. So most of the people there speak English. Most of them there are Christian. But the Muslims came in, or the Arab Muslims came in from the north, from the Sahara Desert, from the Sahel. And most of the people up there in the more arid regions are Muslim. That formed the military that the British Army trained. So most of your military powers in the north up around Aruba, most of your commercial and government capability is down along the coast with the Aruba. But then you've got off on the side where most of the oil is located in the river delta. And you've just got the Ijaw, all 6 or 7 different tribes that are located in there. It's all mangrove swamp. It's incredibly difficult to move around in other than by boat. And 3 very separate, diverse groups of people who historically don't get along, and even now don't really get along, but it kind of a little bit of Afghan overlay because it's so difficult to move around in the river delta. It's very difficult to project governmental strength and knit them all together as a society. So you kind of have to understand. Well, I flew into Lagos the first time, and they wanted me to go out and take a look at a site where Chevron wanted to build a big LPG gas distillation plant. And nobody wanted to go. It's not that it's really dangerous. Well, it is dangerous, but it's not like open warfare. But none of the regular guys wanted to make that trip. I said, well, there's pirates out there, and then the police are more or less corrupt. You can't ever guarantee where they're going to stop and rob and kill you. There's bandits out there. There's all these different things. And a helicopter might do it, but we don't really know if there's a place to land the helicopter. It's an unsurveyed site. So I got a friend who was a Nigerian police officer, and I talked to him. I said, okay, Hanson, how would you suggest we do this? And he smiled and says, okay, this is what we will do. This is monsoon season. It's going to rain very, very hard every afternoon. So you and I will go in my car after 12 o'clock because rain everywhere. And the police, they won't come outside. The bandits, they won't come outside. And my boys, they will meet us out there by where the site will be. I said, okay. We got in the car and we drove through. Didn't see anybody. Just rained like crazy. Came out to this little village. Everybody coming out because I guess no white guy had ever come out there before. But I felt like I was in the zoo. Everybody was coming up wanting to talk and this and really friendly, wonderful people. And I was talking to everybody's a king out there. You know, if you've got 6 guys who will do what you tell them to do, and you've got 3 goats, you're a king in that little space where you're the king. So we were talking to the king. He had a big cinder block house. It was right by the river. And I was saying, well, do you ever see the pirates here? Said, well, the pirates, they come down they call it a creek. Now, this creek is like 200 yards wide. It looks like the Mississippi River.
Wow.
But they come down there every so often, but they go into Lagos because they want to rob the banks and kill the police and take the guns. They don't ever stop here. I said, okay, well, that's good to know. When was the last time they came up here? Oh, it was last week. They probably won't be back till next week. I said, good to know. And then we drove out from there to the actual site. So since it was monsoon, we had to go across areas where it's flooded out, all the rest of this, and we finally got to the jungle and took a look at it. And I did my survey. I took a look at it, came back, and we were talking to everybody, and we gave our results, and they were really happy with it. But again, you got to understand, and they were so happy with the results that they asked me another question and said, well, let me ask you this, because you seem to understand the culture here. The government is going to release a lot of things that the government's had control of forever. They're going to sell the cell phone company. And I'm thinking about buying the cell phone company. I would really like to do this, but I'm afraid. I said, okay, well, what are you afraid of? I said, well, if I buy the cell phone company, the head of the national police has already told me I will have to give it to him or he will kill me and he'll take all my money. It's okay. Well, who does the head of the national police afraid of? Oh, he's afraid of nobody except for the head of the military. Okay, he's afraid of the head of the military. Does the head of the military wanted to come down and take your cell phone company? Says, no, he doesn't really care. So, well, just a suggestion. Why don't you do this? Why don't you call the head of the military and offer him 10, 25% of the profit of the company if he will protect you from the head of the police? And he goes, this is a good idea. Thank you. And we had a similar thing in Afghanistan when we first got there. There were 3 warlords outside of Bagram. And I know this sounds like I'm encouraging mafia and racketeering and all the rest of this, but if that's what you got to work with, you got to work with what you got. Expecting them to follow our laws and regulations and morals ain't going to work. They're not going to do it. That maybe a decade from now, a century from now, maybe they come up with something completely different that works better than what we got. I don't know. But you got to work within the system that exists. But when we first went in Afghanistan, we started hiring the Afghans to come work and help rebuild the base. And that was a good plan. It got people coming in, put money into the economy. We were starting to get things done. Nobody wanted to attack the base because they were making money off of the base. But when the Afghans would leave work, the religious services are on Friday, so they'd leave on Thursday. We'd pay them on Thursday. There'd be gangs waiting for them outside, and they'd beat them up and take all their money. So went out and talked to the 3 warlords. There was the evil warlord, there was a really evil warlord, and there was a, oh my God, Satan has come to earth warlord.
Wow.
So we talked to the lesser of the 3 evils. And we told him, says, look, our guys are getting beat up. Their money's taken all the time. You're right here by the gate. If you can protect these people, get them to their homes and protect them in their homes so their money isn't taken away, then the commander of the base will let you open up a bazaar and have people come and sell things in the bazaar. And he says, well, why should I do all this? He says, number one, you make a friend of the commander of the base with all the military power. This gives you more power than the other 2 warlords that are bigger than you. And he will help to protect you because you're protecting his people. And 2, you can tax the people. I mean, take 10% of their money. Take 10% of the bazaar. Because in America, we have a similar system. We have police. We have to pay for our police through taxes. So the police don't come and just take everything that people they have. They protect the people, and they get 10%, and that pays their salary. And this will pay the salary of your soldiers, and then you have the support of the American military. Now, when you hear all this, this is racketeering 101. We're setting up Al Capone. But what we're doing is we're setting up Al Capone against the other two mafia chiefs to try and give the people a little bit of a break, more than what they got right now. And that's another thing. You got to hit that balance point.
When you were in the military, was there ever a time you regretted being in those situations and just wanted to live a normal life?
What is a normal life? Yeah, I grew up, my dad was in the military. We moved every year that I was growing up in the middle of the school year. So I was always the new kid in school. Never got out of that syndrome. And then from there, I went into the Ranger Battalion in 74 when they started up, and they were trying to figure out what a Ranger Battalion is. How far can we push them before people start dying? Then I went to Special Forces. So for me, the hard part is when I got too old to do all this, and I have no choice but to try and live a normal life. So I haven't quite figured that out yet. But I'm working on it, and I occupy my time with writing stories.
So what is the closest thing you've been able to find to a normal life and some calmness in your life?
Married a great woman from Uzbekistan. I went and lived in Uzbekistan for 2 years to get to know the family. And we've brought parts of the family over here to the States. We've got a nice family circle here now. And I'd call this probably as close as you could get to a normal life. Still trying to find my particular circle, my particular tribe out here. You know, I'll tell a lot of these stories with some of the neighbors, and you see the eyebrows go up and eyes get wide, and I'd back off on it and said, all right, well, if that one's got you worried, I got other stories I probably shouldn't even share.
So as a final question today, what advice would you like to leave with the listeners?
Listen more than you talk, especially to people that you disagree with. And if you really, our politics right now are so confrontational, and people will ask me, well, are you for Trump or are you against Trump? Are you for Kamala Harris or are you against Kamala Harris? I'm not really for either one of them. I'm for what they can do, what they can accomplish. The one thing that I will say for the Trump administration is he's a bull in a china shop, and he is absolutely destroying a lot of the systems and agreements and working relationships that have existed for decades, which in my opinion, that's great. There's a lot of these that need to go. They've been built up over decades from people that are enriching themselves, making big mistakes. Now, what comes out of this, I sincerely hope will be better than what we had. But as George Bush once said when he was challenged over breaking all the diplomatic relationships when they went into Iraq, sometimes change is good. I think we're due for change. I sincerely hope that it changes for the better. But the only way that's going to happen is if we all get out of this guy is evil and we have to fight him with all we got, and get down to what have we really got right now? What's going on? What can we build out of this? And what can we build out of this together? What do we really need versus what we think we want? And what can we actually accomplish? And there's a lot we can do in this country if we stop shouting at one another and we spend a little more time listening to one another.
Christopher Brewer's book is called In the Shadows Between the Wars, Becoming a Special Forces Operator. Chris, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciated this conversation.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Please go to my website at podcastreallife.com for more information about my guest and the things we discussed today, including a link to his new book. That's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.